Here's how to crush the most played chess opening, the Italian game. I pulled off the online database of chess games to show you that it is legit and 98% of your opponents will go down and will be unable to find the correct response. So initially I'm just picking the top line, the most played line all the time, and this is indeed the Italian game. Now we go d4, striking and center, attacking the bishop as well as this pawn. Your opponent recaptures, and now guess what? Most of my players will automatically recapture this pawn, and after that there is extensive theory. But we're going to surprise your opponent by playing queenside castling, and that move, although trivial in general, in this particular position is really poisonous. What is the problem here for black? Well, as you look at the stats, the most played moves by black are either just capturing this pawn because it makes sense, otherwise you're going to capture yourself, attack the bishop, and then keep pushing your pawns forward, or castling queenside, which is another losing error. Again, finding the right move for black here is extremely tricky. I'm going to share with you the correct line a little later, but for now, let's initially explore the most played line. So your opponents will see that you're going to capture this pawn, attack the bishop, and they're going to take on c3. Now, at this point, there is another surprise that you can pull off. It's the move bishop takes f7. At this point, your opponent is convinced that you are absolutely out of your mind or just playing various random moves and giving up material, but of course, it is trickier. We're extracting the king, now it is exposed and vulnerable to our attack. At this point, you play pawn e5, chasing away this knight. Why do we want to do that? Because as the knight goes away to any square, we don't really care. It is going to eliminate the defense of the square d5, and our queen can go there and attack the king and the bishop. Now, here's the beauty of this position. Look at the stats right here. Now, all these moves that you can see on the right side are losing errors. That is really, really phenomenal. And the correct move by black was only played here by 2% of players, pawn d5. And, like, if your opponent plays the correct move, you know what to do, right?
Okay, let's do the procedure. Block.
Now let's continue. In most cases, your opponents are going to move the knight to g4 and hoping to attack this pawn on e5. And now there is a winning move, queen to d5. As we discussed before, it's going to be a double attack. But there is another one, which is even trickier. And using this 1 horsepower is basically enough to win the game. You're delivering the check to the king, plus you're opening up this discovered attack of their knight, and in most cases they're going to go back to g8 trying to hide the king to safety, but it fails, because now you don't even need this knight, you don't need to take it, because there is a move queen to d5, check, again we're still following most played line, and as you can see, in only 11 moves, you're checkmating your opponent. Now, of course, your opponent doesn't have to play these exact moves, he may play anything else, but your plan remains to be exactly the same. So let's say your opponent initially captures this pawn on b2 with a counterattack. Well, guess what? You just recapture. In a way, it only makes it better for you, because now you also have this additional piece into play. They're still going to need to do something about that hanging knight on f6, and if they move it anywhere, not necessarily to g4, any other square, e4 or e8 or g8, literally doesn't matter. You've bring the queen out to d5 and you hit all these birds with one queen. Then the king needs to move because it's in check. The king goes anywhere. Again, doesn't really matter for us. Now you can grab one of these pieces, in this case a knight. If there was no knight, you would just capture this bishop on c5, and believe it or not, basically you have already won the game, because your opponent is totally stuck. Notice that they move the king back and forth, therefore they cannot castle anymore. Therefore, what can they do? Now, they are also going to be having a lot of challenges with completing their development, because if they ever move this d pawn forward either to d6 or d5, you have this magical move on capture, but in this case it is a double magic because it is also a discover check, and that is absolutely suicidal. That only opened up their own king entirely, plus you have a ton of attacking ideas right here. So what can they do instead? Well, if the d pawn move cannot be played straight away, maybe they can play queen e7 first, preparing d6 on the next turn. Then you just develop, and after d6 or whatever, you bring the knight out, you keep attacking. Again, their problem is their king is exposed and they cannot complete their development, while you have a lot of ideas on how to just keep bringing more pieces into play and attacking. But in this case, you don't even need that, because after any move of black, they need to maintain the guard of this square c7, but in this case it's not going to be helpful for them, because you're going to sack your knight anyway with this fork, and after they accept it, you're still going to use the very same discover check, but in this case they have no way to defend both the king and the queen. Now let's take it a step back and see if your opponent can deviate in any way. Right after you played pawn to c3, you are getting ready to push the other pawn forward and start attacking him, therefore there's really not much he can do, unless he wants to just give you this attack for free. And knight f6 is indeed the best move by far. It attacks your central pawn, black is getting ready to castle kingside, and that is why it is the main line. Now we go pawn d4, counterattack them in the center. They have to take this pawn, if not you're going to capture something yourself, and they will. Now they expect you to recapture, but as you know, we're going to surprise them with casting. And now why is this move so critical? Because if you take right here straight away, then they have this check which saves the day for them, because it gives them this vital tempo, so on the next turn they can capture this pawn or play d5 and get some counterplay against you. But if instead of recapturing you castle, you take that opportunity away from them, they can no longer check you in any way. Now, so far we talked about them capturing this pawn on c3, and we discovered that, very surprising, bishop takes f7 sacrifice, where it's really hard for them to figure out the way out, and in most played line, they're just getting checkmated within a couple moves. Again, let's take this back and think what else can they possibly play. What if your opponent realizes that having a centralized king is dangerous, and let's just castle? Now, as you can see, there is 2 question marks adding to this move because it is a losing blunder. And yes, life is not fair. White has just castled, and it was a good move. Black did the exact same thing, and it is a losing blunder. Now, that basically allows you to execute your main threat of the Italian game. You capture this pawn, you attack the bishop, and after this bishop moves anywhere, you don't care at all. This bishop b4 move would be pointless in this case because there's no king, so there's no check, and if in most cases they're going to go back. But now you have these 2 monstrous pawns which are ready to be brought forward and to chase away these knights. So you start by going pawn d5, attacking this knight, and to his unpleasant surprise, this knight has no convenient squares to go to. They would love to bring it to the center somewhere here or here, but they can't do that because you've got your knight which controls these both squares. And if the knight goes back somewhere, then you just can keep pushing. You play e5. This time you chase away the other knight. Plus you keep seizing more and more space. After the knight goes anywhere, you can keep pushing. And now d6, not only you gain 1 more tempo, but also, as you notice, this pawn on d6 totally cramps their queen side. Now this pawn can't get out, the bishop can't get out, so the rook can't get out. The queen has no squares to go to, and it's totally cramped. By the way, your pawn is guarded. Therefore, they can't take it with a knight. That would just drop the knight. And if this knight moves anywhere, again, we keep developing and attacking. This time can bring the bishop out, hitting their queen. The queen has no squares to go to. Their position is so bad. This pawn cannot move. It is also pinned. And after they bring the knight out, which is the only move to avoid losing the queen, then you play knight c3. Now you're ready to double down on this pin. You can play knight d5 on the next turn. Your opponent is, by the way, totally paralyzed. He may try to go h6 at least to kick away this bishop from g5, but you're going to ignore that and play queen d3. A very surprising move, obviously computer idea. Maybe someone like Mikhail Tal would find that as well, but a very difficult move to find. You just ignore this attack, let them capture your bishop, because there is this very surprising recapture. Queen takes g6, and thanks to the pin, they cannot recapture. This pawn is pinned down to the king, which allows you to bring your queen forward and to start this attack out of nothing. Right now, this pawn on g5 is hanging. If they do nothing special, you will capture it, and from there, you're going to also capture the other one on f7. What can they do? If they try to play knight to h7 to defend this pawn on g5, you have a nightmare tactic. You've got knight to d5, letting them capturing this queen, and if not, you're going to play knight e7 anyways. So after that, you've got this double check, and then a nightmare checkmate. At this point, you may be wondering, well, Igor, there must be a correct way for black, right? Well, the correct move right here for black is not pawn takes c3, it is not castle, not any other move, but knight takes e4, which is actually quite counterintuitive, and it looks very risky, because there is this centralized king, and it looks like putting the knight right there is just going to be extremely dangerous. Plus, you can recapture and attack the bishop. But the move that saves black here is not moving the bishop, but another counterintuitive move, pawn d5. But even then, it only gives black an approximately equal game, and again, you will probably never see this in your chess games at all, because all these moves are so high level. In most cases, your opponents are going to drop the bishop back, but that allows you to keep pushing and basically develop a somewhat similar attack. Now, the knight needs to move somewhere. Black would also wish to control the e-file and cover their king somehow, because otherwise you can bring your queen or rook there and start attacking. So if the knight comes back to cover up their king, then you can play queen e2, attacking this knight in the middle of the board. And if the knight goes, again, you have plenty of attacking opportunities, really. You can stack your heavy pieces against his knight and king, you can bring the bishop out, etc. Pawn d6, knight c3, a ton of ideas. If they want to slow you down, they may try knight to d6, so that at least they wish to trade off your bishop. And then you just slide back to d3, and your opponent is happy at this point. He thinks, okay, finally I can castle to safety. And that is the furthest from the truth, because here bishop takes h7 is a typical Greek gift sacrifice, but in a slightly unusual environment, so your opponent still didn't expect that. And after king takes, there's this knight g5 check, and moving the king forward is just very dangerous. You're going to keep attacking, and if the king goes back, then after queen h5, the queen is going to be brought to h7 on the next move. There is no defense against that, and you're going to win the game quickly. And if you want to know 2 simple ideas that can instantly boost your chess results and rating, check out this video right there.